Welcome to Power Lunch Live. I am Rhett Power, your host. It's good to be with you here today. Got almost March, which is just hard to believe that we're almost in March 2021. But anyway, here we are. It's good to be with you today. The point of Power Lunch Live is to have today's thought leaders, best-selling authors, people who are doing amazing work in the world that we can all learn from so that we can get better at what we do. Gary Chan is with us today. We're going to have a great conversation about cybersecurity and how that's relevant to you as a leader in your business. So that's going to be an interesting conversation today. Now, we do broadcast on LinkedIn, Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, all those platforms. We monitor those platforms during the program. So if you have a question, please get to us, write us an email or an inbox message or whatever, so that we can ask Gary those questions, so that we can get you answer the questions that you need answered. So let me introduce Gary. Gary is a cybersecurity expert. He's got he helps companies build, improve their cybersecurity programs. He's been in the industry for over 16 years, got multiple security certifications. He's an electrical engineering and computer science degree from MIT. He's worked with dozens of countries, states, government agencies, to help them with their information security programs. And so he's going to be here today to help us sort of talk through cybersecurity the way it is now, what it might look like in the future, the things that you have to think about really so that you can protect your customers and their information. So Gary, welcome. Thank you for being here. This is going to be interesting, I think.
Well, thank you very much for having me on your show. Very excited to be here, Rhett.
Yeah, I mean, I'm glad we finally able to work it out. I've had some schedule conflicts, and Gary's been kind enough to be patient. But talk about. I mean, I think it's interesting. I mean, technology is moving so fast. Why do companies, even small companies, really need to think about cybersecurity? I mean, some of us haven't given that a lot of thought. And what's the problem with that?
Sure. Well, I'll tell you the three reasons why companies should have InfoSec, and I'll start with the one that people care about the most, but think about the least. So the first is to enable sales. So if you're a small company and you want to sell to the federal government, guess what? Your contract says that you have to do a lot of cybersecurity stuff. So if you don't do it, you don't sell. And that's it flows down. So they buy from big companies, small companies, whoever it is, and all that along that entire chain, they require everybody to have cybersecurity. So if you don't have it, you can't sell to big businesses anymore. So enabling sales is one. And then two is meeting compliance. So laws, regulations, things like that. You just kind of have to have it. You can't be like, oh yeah, I lost all of my employees' social security numbers. That's okay. Guess what? You're going to get fined. Something bad's going to happen. Your employee's going to walk. I mean, there's just compliance issues. And then the third is the reason why everybody thinks about it, but actually why people never really buy it, which is for security purposes, which is, obviously keeping yourself safe, right? Companies tend to care more about the bottom line, which they see as revenue, and then reducing as much cost as possible. So I would say the third reason is actually the reason least that people will buy it, but the first one is the real driver there.
What is what I really thought about in that before I asked that, right after I asked that question, is maybe I need to ask the first question, which is, can you define what cybersecurity means and what is the architecture of it, if that makes sense? Like what are the keys to it, I guess?
Sure. Well, let me start by defining a couple of different terms. So I hear a lot cybersecurity, and I also hear information security. Those two are actually kind of different. And let me define both just so that we're on the same page. So if we have, let's say that you have a list on a sheet of paper of all of your employees' social security numbers, right? And then you leave it on the train. Well, that's unfortunate. You had lost some data. That is not a cybersecurity incident because it has nothing to do with the computer. So that would be, however, an information security incident because you're losing information. Now, let's say that you keep that list in a spreadsheet on your computer. and then you lose that file from your computer, that is both an information security incident because it's information, and it's also a cybersecurity incident because it was digital. Just defining it, cybersecurity would be sort of loss of digital information, or even a change of information, or not being able to access it. So it's basically something to do with digital information. And then information security is a bit broader than that, which includes things in the physical realm.
So I mean, I think a lot of us assume, so, and I know I'm guilty of this, but I have a small company. I'm growing the company, but I have my website out. I'm gonna pick on GoDaddy for a second, and I have my CRM attached to that maybe and stuff. And when I buy that, I assume that that's secure. Is that a misguided assumption?
That is misguided. It's not entirely wrong, but it is slightly misguided. What I would say is it depends on who you're buying from. So not speaking about GoDaddy specifically, but any vendor that you buy from, they may have better or worse security, right? So if someone bought from you, do they have good or bad security, right? That's really on you. So you're making some assumption about what the other company has or doesn't have. And then the second thing that's being done there is, the question is, how much can they really do? So let's take Microsoft. So Microsoft, what they do is they have these third-party certifications. They say, oh, I've got a SOC 2 report. We can talk about any of these things, but the basic thing is they have all these certifications that say that they have great security. Well, that security really only covers a certain number of things, what they'll never know is how you actually use the system, right? So they don't know who you are. I mean, they know they got your credit card number, but they don't really know who you are. So let's say that you hire somebody on your team and that person has your customer list, and that's all stored in Microsoft Cloud, on OneDrive or whatever. And he takes a new job somewhere else, and then he goes to download all the information to bring to his new employer. I mean, you're probably not okay with that, I would guess. But Microsoft would be totally fine with it, because they first off, they wouldn't even know, that the guy got a new job offer, right? So the thing is that it's the security is still incumbent upon the buyer because they fill a lot of gaps that the other side couldn't possibly even know about your business. Yeah. So for those two reasons, I would say are the biggest gaps.
How do you prevent that?
Oh, so that's called third-party risk management. So for the larger companies, whenever they make a purchase, they'll run it through a third-party risk management program, which basically will say, okay, well, is this company reputable? Are they, is this a company that has good information security? Are they going to, agree to tell me if they lost information, right? Like that'll be all written in the contract. So basically, you do it through partially legal means in the contract so that you can sue them, and then also partially through your assessment program, which generally does a couple things. It might ask for a certification from the company. So say, hey, give me your whatever certification from a security perspective. Or if they don't have a certification, they ask like 10 questions or 100 questions, whatever it is that buying company wants to know, that would make them feel like they have good security. And so then what happens then is that for these larger organizations, if they fail that sort of security assessment, then they either don't buy from them, or they ask the vendor to fix it, or they ask the vendor for a discount. So that's typically how they sort of manage it. Smaller companies really won't be able to do that. So you just have to buy it from a reputable company, a company that has a security certification of sorts, and then just do proper, what I call security hygiene, which is using it properly.
So going back to something you said that really caught my attention. I think one of the things that we often don't think a lot about is that employee example that you just stated, right? I've got my customer list, I have my financials, I have whatever. I mean, we all have some information that is uniquely ours, even if we have a similar business, right? And we don't want to hand that out to a competitor or what have you. how do you prevent that downloading of that information? How do you prevent? I mean, you still have to give people access, right? You still have to have a degree of trust, but
Mhm.
how do you prevent that kind of somebody just taking a download and handing it over?
Yeah, so that's
You know,
called a
there's a lot
data.
of moral and ethical issues of why somebody would do that, but aside from that,
Yeah, no, I'll explain sort of the what companies tend to do. So if you're a small business, you tend to do it through legal means. So what I would say is, have the employee sign a sheet of paper that says that that the company information is the company's information. When you leave, you can be sued if you take it, right? So
uh-huh.
that's how smaller companies tend to do it. It's pretty cheap to do, and then whenever they leave, you remind them that they signed this document. And that just at least cautiously makes it in the front of their mind. If they still take it, you know, you got to either sue them or let it go.
How do
Bigger
you
business,
how do you know
right?
if they take it? How do you know if people take stuff? Go
Yep.
ahead. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, and then so I'll get to that question in a moment, but let me answer for big business too. So big business, you'll have a data loss prevention program, where you would actually have tools in place that would actually scan every document, for example, that they download and that they take off of your device, that they email it, whatever. And then if it matches any criteria, hey, your customer list is your customer list. If it hits this, you can either prevent it from even leaving, or you can let it go and then it just sends you, Rhett, an email and says John Smith downloaded this thing, FYI, right? So basically that's the way that bigger business would do it. If you wanted to know whether or not someone took the information with you, or sorry, with them when they left, unfortunately, you really just have to have some sort of auditing turned on. So, for example, if you're using any of the Microsoft products, I mean, this is true for pretty much any of the major companies, right? I don't want to just pick out on Microsoft. It's just that people happen to know it. But they have auditing features that you can turn on. Sometimes you have to pay for that though. So
Sure.
once it's turned on, then you can see basically what everyone did. And what some people will actually do is use that for performance. So they look at it and say, hey, was this guy even using the systems that we've been giving to them? Or, if they're just at home watching TV, then there's no activity, right? So they use it for performance management also. But there are these tools that you can do to do that. So it kind of goes from, just have legal stuff to maybe a little bit of auditing to all the way to data loss prevention program. Um, yeah.
Yeah, that sounds. I mean, that makes a lot of sense to me. Um, so why do small companies need to think about it, and how do they keep this? I mean, how do they keep this within some sort of budget? I mean, this seems like it's you just kind of explained one way, I guess, through legal ways. But what are some other ways to sort of know that you're okay with your information and know that you're protecting it the best you can, particularly from a small, medium enterprise standpoint?
Yeah. So I think you asked a lot of questions there. So let me break it down a bit.
Sure.
Uh, Um,
Yeah,
so
let me throw something else in there because it's because a lot of times you're at that size, you're contracting, right? You
mhm.
don't have an internal team to do this, so you're contracting. And let me throw another question on there. How do you know you're getting a good contractor to come in and help you with this? That's
Sure.
quite a complicated, but
Yeah, you might have to remind me of some of the questions in a moment, but
sure.
let me start out with so why should small businesses care? Because basically, if you lose your data, you could get fined. You
Right.
may I mean, you're going to have a reputational loss. People are not going to be happy. Whatever it is, you're going to have some sort of repercussion. I think the only positive side, and I say this as a joke, is that most small businesses don't know when they've lost their data. So,
I was going to ask you that
yeah, if
actually.
you don't know, then it's not a problem. The problem, unfortunately, is that they will oftentimes manipulate your data and do certain things so that you may end up actually losing money and things like that, and you might not even know, which is even in my opinion, that's actually way worse. Not knowing that you're losing things.
Is
um,
that pretty common?
yeah, oh yeah. I mean that's what people do. I mean, in fact, a lot of this ransomware, and what they do is it looks for banking. So anytime you go to a banking website, what it'll do is it'll actually show up. It'll say bankofamerica.com, right? You go to bankofamerica.com,
Right.
but remember the malware is installed on your PC. So basically, even though it says bankofamerica.com, the bad guy has control of it, and so they can display the whole Bank of America thing, but what they do is they layer on top of it another form that you can't see. So when you enter in your username and password, it's passing it to him. And then it also immediately passes it to Bank of America. So it does log in and it looks like everything's normal. And then they can actually look at what your bank account balance is. They can pull money out by issuing a transfer, but it'll still only, it won't display it on the screen because remember, it's going through the malware first, and the malware will just strip out, that extra transfer, so you won't see it when you look at your bank account.
Right.
So there's a bunch of very, very clever stuff that people do, or if they're just siphoning off your data, like if you're going to do a competitive bid with the next guy down the road who also does construction work, they always know what your pricing is, always, because they have access to your computer. So there's a lot of stuff that goes on, and then you have a lot of these services. You can just hire some guy to go do this on the internet. And they'll do it for you for $500 if you can know everything that your neighbor does. Why not, right? So if you don't have ethics, I say that, of course. So a lot of reasons why you'd want to do it, but I always go back to the first one, which is you can actually increase your sales because guess what? Nobody else really has security. So if you have it and the other two guys don't, then you can sell more. In terms of your question of how do you keep it on a budget, frankly speaking, this stuff is so uber cheap. I really just point people towards free stuff all the time. So honestly, people say, what's your value? And I say the value is in basically 1 hour. I'll just tell you all the stuff that you need to go do, and I'll save you like 10 grand. So, the thing is that you don't need to, if you're running away from a bear, you don't need to run faster than the bear. You just need to run faster than like one other person. And there's so many people who don't even have antivirus software on their machine that it's kind of silly, in my opinion, because you can get that for free. Just trying to answer all of those pieces. The point is you can actually do it for super, super cheap. Like you shouldn't be spending like 10 grand to go do this thing. Like you can spend a few $100s, a couple $1,000, and you'll be good. In fact, I actually push people towards free stuff and things that are very inexpensive. They're willing to spend money. I'll give them something. Okay, yeah, you can do this. This is the next level. This will give you a greater comfort level. But because I know that if I go beyond like the $5,000 mark, they just lose the interest completely.
So having those protections even on your laptop or on your computers in your office is a first step in sort of preventing, like you talked about, the bank account stuff, right? Or does that solve that problem?
It does, and it also I think the first step really is just a little bit of training too with your employees, right? So if someone sends you an invoice for something, and then the next month they ask you to change the bank account number, you're probably it's probably somebody sending you a fraudulent invoice. Just these little things that people don't necessarily think about, because small businesses tend to like to hire people maybe straight out from school or something. Get a lot of people in early. They have no training, none, right? If you get someone who's very seasoned, they may catch a lot of this stuff, but really the guys, the people who haven't been in the industry before, they don't get it. And then to your last question too, which was, you outsource a lot of the IT stuff. How do you know if they're doing it? Well, I would say if you're outsourcing your IT stuff to say one, so I see two different models usually. They usually either hire it out to one person who comes in periodically. And I'm going to tell you, if one person kind of comes in periodically and they're servicing other clients too, do you really think they're doing 24/7 monitoring for security of your? It's just not possible. They got to sleep.
Right.
So you're not getting it, right? If you're outsourcing it to like an IT shop, like IT MSSP, managed service provider, MSP, then they have some security, but they're probably just limited to firewalls. You'll get a couple of different types. One is where they say, hey, I've got all the security, and they really just have a firewall. And then you've got another type, which you're going to have to pay more for, which says that, no, we have that, and we also have a SOC, security operations center, and you'll want to ask them for a external third-party audit report or something like that to prove that they actually have it. And if they have that, then you're way better off. But at the same time, you still need to do some of the training with your employees, because like I said, if someone wants to steal your customer list, they call up your IT provider and says, hey, could you download everything for me onto this CD? They'll probably just say, yes, sir, because they're not paid to, handle your security at that level, if that makes sense.
It seems to me that this is about, to a large extent, putting as many firewalls or layers in your security as you can, because the easier it almost seems like the easier the target, the more likely you are to get have some sort of compromise, right? I mean, do people just kind of move? If you have some protections, they're more likely to move on to somebody that's going to be easier.
That's the whole idea. So that's exactly it. And then you also do it based on the data that you have, right? So if you're not really worried about this particular piece of data, you don't have to protect it as much. But you just don't want to take that to the limit, and where you have basically no protection, because frankly, they'll just use that machine to get all your other data, right? So, but yeah, you just have to run faster than at least one other guy.
Does it start with? Again, I'm thinking of my situation. I have an office, small office. We have internet connections. Does it really start with like protecting your routers and protecting your your network and all that? I mean, is that?
So I would say I hate to say it depends. What I will say is that I basically, because I've talked with a lot of businesses in the past, I put together like this sort of, these 12 activities that people should do just in general. And it spans things from the network to the laptops and things like that. So just to give you at a very high level, just a couple of things like, just back up your data, keep it somewhere else. So at least even if you lose some, it's not like totally lost. You'll want to, put some antivirus software on those laptops. And then you'll also want to secure your network.
Mm-hmm.
You'll want to, just be very clear with everyone, both through your policy and through with training on, what your expectations are of security. And we can talk about any of these things too, but it's really fairly straightforward. You just need to do some things on the devices, some things on the network, and have some training with your people. So,
is Wi-Fi good to have in the office, or should it all be done?
That's totally fine to have Wi-Fi. So as long as you set it up properly. So when I say properly, AES, so they'll on your Wi-Fi, you can sort of set up the different protocols that they want to use. So as long as you're using something that's strong, so I think it's like WPA2, so not WEP, then you can have that and then just put a password on it. And what I also tell people too is like, you need to be really good about, most of the time when hackers are stealing things, they're just taking the lowest hanging fruit, right? So if you operate like Starbucks, in that you put on your window the password to your Wi-Fi, that's not particularly helpful, right? I mean, people say, oh, but it's got a password on it, I'm secure. Well, everyone else knows the password, so I can still steal all of your stuff. So, you just got to be smart about that.
Yeah.
Yeah, people don't truly understand sometimes the what the security means. So if you have encryption on your laptop, but it's encryption in flight, but you're already logged in, well, anybody can take all of your data, even though it's encrypted. It's completely irrelevant that it's encrypted.
I mean, that's interesting. Like I hadn't thought about that, but even if when I'm traveling, right, I can be off my home network and I can be in a hotel or a Starbucks somewhere traveling, which hopefully soon we can do. My laptop's not secure if I'm on that Wi-Fi for Starbucks. How do you prevent that?
So I would have to use a VPN. There are these companies like Private Internet Access. If you go there, you can buy a VPN that's like $3 a month. So you can connect to the Starbucks Wi-Fi, and for that brief moment, you'll be vulnerable. But then you turn on your your VPN and assuming that you trust the VPN provider, what happens is it tunnels all of your data through to them, to that VPN provider, before going out to the internet. And so in that way, you can be sort of assured that at least nobody in that Starbucks or at the hotel or whatever is looking at what you're doing. But otherwise, yes, they would be able to. Like anybody could go look, basically.
That's fascinating. A little scary, fascinating.
Yeah.
Because I think, again, I mean, you could do all the things in the world, but you go and you sit there, they can grab your customer list if they wanted.
They have this device called the Pineapple Wi-Fi, because it's this really small sort of box. If you're not on a video, I don't know, it's like a few inches by a few inches by a few inches. It's very small, and basically it'll send out a signal like a regular Wi-Fi. You can program it to look like Starbucks or whatever you want, and they put it inside a pineapple container, and then they just drop it off at next to the plants. It looks like decoration. And so nobody's going to think, oh well, there's a Wi-Fi signal coming out from that pineapple. Nobody's going to think that. And so people can connect to the pineapple, and then the hacker can see everything that's on there, because it's going through that system. So there's a bunch of stuff that people come up with that's really quite cute and clever.
So what are some recent hacks or things that you're sort of taking a look at? And when you talked about a little bit about SolarWinds and some of these others, what are some of the recent things that are out there that we should be aware of?
Yeah, so I think the SolarWinds one, and then there's Silver Sparrow yesterday. SolarWinds one is really interesting because that one it's a supply chain attack, and let me explain what that is. So essentially, if I want to hack into your company, Rhett, I could either do it directly, basically try to hack your company, or I could try to hack any of your vendors. Because if I hack those vendors, then at some point, that malware would get into your system because I hacked the people that you use.
Right.
And so that's exactly what this is. SolarWinds is a company that sells a product called SolarWinds Orion, and that's used on like thousands and thousands of customers. And when I say customers, I mean large organizations and government agencies and things like that. It's used in thousands of customers' systems. And when I say their systems, I mean all of their computers, right? Because they install this on all of their PCs. And so what the Russians allegedly did was insert malware into that code so that basically they could then go into any of those SolarWinds' customer systems. And so by doing that, they got access to a ton of different agencies. You can go look it up on the internet, and then basically just take over. So imagine if the Russians could basically click a button and do anything in any of our federal agencies. That it's not quite that broad, but that's just pretty scary.
Yeah.
But yeah, always things like that. Or you hear about the ransomwares with the different schools are very popular, hitting schools and city governments, and then hospital systems because they don't want them to go down. So you probably hear about a lot of the ransomware stuff as well.
Right. What so in all of this, what does the future look like? I mean, we've been talking a lot about the here and now, right? What you should be doing right now. But if you pulled out your crystal ball and said 5 years, 10 years from now, what small, medium enterprise really, what are the areas where we're going to have to spend some money and where we're going to have to really protect ourselves? What would those be?
Well, I would say small businesses, I'm hoping that by that time they'll have some basic level of security. I don't really see that happening. I see basically it kind of continuing with it the way that it is today. Medium-sized businesses will start investing to basically improve their programs to add things like DLP and data loss prevention and some of the stuff that we talked about earlier. And then large businesses will be using artificial intelligence. So if they can replace, a squad of people with, one AI, I mean, why wouldn't you, from a business perspective?
Right.
So I really see it kind of being driven by the bigger companies, the ones because they're the ones that are in a position to already have the basics down, and then looking for a lot of the advanced things, and AI being probably one of the top contenders.
Is AI going to change? How is that going to change things? I mean, I think I get it, but I think, is it going to make fewer mistakes? Is it going to catch things that are irregular? How are we going to use AI in that way?
Oh yeah, I think you got it. I think it's going to be a lot faster. So I think they're going to AI will obviously move quicker than a human, and then it's also much better at detecting anomalies. So if there's just something weird that's going on, it'll pick up on that a lot faster than a human will. I think that and that's already the fight that's occurring. But then you end up with very interesting things, which is you have people who are building things specifically that look like humans, and you can see like for example, whenever they want to check whether somebody using a website is a bot, they'll look for things like systematically, exactly every 1 second they're doing this thing, or they can't be faster than 0.1 milliseconds because a human can't move that quick, or whatever, right? And so people are actually building in things to look like humans by randomizing it and saying, well, between 1 second and 5 seconds, do this thing, and then make this random event occur. So they actually look more human than humans do. And actually took this little interesting quiz, which is, I was looking at Amazon reviews, and there was an AI that wrote like 10 reviews, and then there were 10 reviews that were written by humans. And I was asked to pick out which ones were written by humans, which ones written by computers. And I'm not the world's foremost expert in that human psychology or whatever, but I think I've lived with humans for my whole life, so I figured I could probably do this task. And I was like wrong like 95% of the time. I was actually wrong more than I was correct, which just goes to show, because the AI, what it did was it actually put in a lot of emotional words into there, and that's what humans pick up on. So, oh man, I love this thing, and then using large caps and exclamation. Those are all robots writing it. It wasn't the humans writing it. So it's just going to get really confusing, I think, in the future. So that's where I would say in the future it's going to be very confusing.
That's interesting. I don't know what to think about that. But it makes sense. I mean, it makes sense that that's going to get so advanced that and the technology and the innovation around that is actually really fascinating. But
what are some of the things that keep you up at night, Rhett?
In terms of security, or in terms of AI, in terms of technology?
In terms of security and AI.
I don't, our business. I think I'd have been more concerned when I had the toy company and the manufacturing company, and we did B2B, and we did a lot of consumer transactions, and we had a more robust stuff I was more worried about. Now I don't. With coaching, I think the only thing I would say that I would want to make sure are secure are your notes and your conversations with people, whether that be via Zoom or whether that be over the phone, making sure that those conversations about people's confidential stuff are secure. I think that would be the biggest worry. But I don't have a lot of. I'm not worried about transactional security so much, because the client list is relatively small, and the banking stuff concerns me a little bit, what you just mentioned, and making sure that we protect ourselves there. But that's what would worry me the most, is conversations and making sure those are secure and locked down. So, and with the way we're moving towards video, that's probably more of a concern as we move forward, right? That because you're trusting a platform like Zoom or Microsoft the Teams or whatever to make sure that those conversations are kept private.
No, it makes a ton of sense. Thank you for sharing.
Yeah. So, but yeah, thank you so much for being on today. I mean, I think this is enlightening, and if there are other things that we should be aware of, just shoot me a note, and let's jump back on and have a conversation about it. If there are things that come up that you think people should be aware of, happy to have you back on and to sort of bring those to people's attention.
Yeah, no, that sounds good. Thank you for having me on the show. And if your show produces notes, I'm happy to send you a link to the sort of 12 security steps sheet that I sort of just give away to small businesses.
Talk about what's on there. Yeah, explain. Yeah, talk about that for a second.
Oh, okay, sure. So I just list out. I'll just say them then. The first thing is back up your data. The second thing is know your legal obligations. So a lot of people don't know what the state laws, what the federal laws are relative to information security and their business. The third is to grant limited access rights. So even if you're using stuff in the cloud, just make sure that if Rhett is the only person that should have access, make sure you grant it only to Rhett and grant only the information that you need them to have access to. Fourth is to provide security awareness training to your employees. There are a ton of free videos, and I even just put some on my website. You can just have people watch that when they start with your company. The fifth is to use multi-factor authentication. People lose their passwords all the time. So having that second thing where they sort of text you with an SMS with your secondary code or use some other application, that's really helpful because then they can't get in with only your password. The sixth thing is to use endpoint security software. So some sort of antivirus software. You can pick it up at Best Buy, or most of the time it's free even through your internet service provider. The seventh is update and patch. So just make sure that you don't, at this point, most devices patch on their own. Just don't stop it, right? A lot of people like clicking to cancel and not rebooting it. Just let it run, right? Like just do it. Eight is have some sort of email security. So if you already use G Suite or Microsoft Office for your email, you're fine because they already have that in there. But if you're using one of the cheaper providers, they probably don't have email security, and there's a lot of malware that comes in through email. The ninth thing is to manage your mobile devices. So people will lose their devices, their phone, right? So make sure you have a way to remotely wipe it. And it comes with a lot of these things. So like Apple phones come with Find My, and you just enroll it, and you can later, if you lose it, you can wipe it. It's not great because you lost your device, but you would have lost it anyway. So at least don't lose your data. Right. The 10th is we talked a little bit about was securing your Wi-Fi. So use that WPA2, use a good password. Don't post it everywhere. Just give it to the people who need it. Change your password if you already posted it. So use good Wi-Fi. 11th is to establish policies, right? Like it's really hard for you to go after somebody, whether legally or, even anything, if you never told them that they couldn't do it. So I think you and I, we believe that, hey, it should be obvious you shouldn't steal from your company. Right. But some people may be like, hey, why not? So this is good. So just make sure you have a good policy. It's written down. They sign it. They understand it. Just spend an hour with them. It's not a big deal. And then the last 12th item is to buy cyber insurance. So that may be helpful through your insurance provider if you have any concerns, because it could get expensive if you don't have it. It's like like healthcare insurance, you just have it just in case. So anyway, those are the 12 things. And like I said, for the most part, it's very inexpensive. I don't know why everyone doesn't do it. But anyway, that's what they are.
Yeah, let's post a link to that on the link in LinkedIn, and I'll share it around on the other links for Twitter and YouTube and Facebook. Thank you so much, Gary. How can people find you?
Oh, yeah, they can just go to my website, alfizo, alfizo.com. And like I said, I have a bunch of free stuff on there. And if you want to contact me, then you can just go to the bottom and fill out the form, and it'll come to me.
Wonderful. Thank you. All right, guys, thank you so much for being here with us today on Power Lunch Live. We'll be back next week. We're off the rest of the week, and we'll see you next week. You can go to Power Lunch Live to look at the upcoming shows. And next month, we're going to be kicking off the new show, Courageous Leadership Live. and it may be renamed. Who knows? That's our working name right now as we prepare for the new show. But looking forward to that. But go to Power Lunch Live, check out our schedule coming up in March, and we'll see you next week.